Foundation. I'd like to welcome you to our first session in the Show Me the Money, or at least Where to Get It series. This series is part of the e-learning collaborative within the equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem known as E3. And E3 creates the conditions that allow entrepreneurs to accelerate their businesses no matter what stage they are within their entrepreneurial journey. And through E3, entrepreneurs are connected to resources that can help them identify the best course of action to take in order to tackle the challenges that are keeping them from growing their businesses and achieving their goals. We offer customized services, professional support, and guided decision-making from industry experts to help businesses increase their revenue and create new jobs. You can learn more about the P2Pont Freedom Foundation and E3 at p2pontfreedomfoundation.org. So today, we will be discussing how to finance the future of your business with a presentation from our keynote speaker, followed by a panel discussion. This webinar will be recorded and available on demand for all of our E3 members. Please utilize the Q&A function to ask your questions and also the chat box. We'll be moderating that throughout the presentations in a panel discussion and addressing all of the questions as they come in. So our keynote speaker today has more than 14 years of executive level banking experience, serving in key roles at some of the largest financial institutions nationally and regionally. He has over 25 years of small business experience and is currently the Senior Partnerships Manager for KIVA USA. He is also the founder of America's largest microlending conference and is an author of 13 books. We're honored to have him lend his time and expertise to speak with us this afternoon. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Warren Galloway. Warren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Thank you. Show me the money, or at least where to get it. Great title for today's presentation. And just to let our guests know, I think this is less of a presentation and more of a talk, because I'm really going to work with the entrepreneurs to give them guidance in terms of how to apply for this thing called a microloan. My family say I'm kind of quirky when it comes to jokes. So I put a joke at the beginning of this talk where I say, a lot of you are probably expecting to hear from Cuba Gooding Jr. when he says, "Show me the money," from the movie Jerry Maguire. But unfortunately, I'm not a Hollywood star. But on that note, what I want to talk about really is a strategy that I want all the entrepreneurs today to learn how to properly apply for funding. Most people just arbitrarily apply for funding when they need a loan and just hope that they get approved. The goal is to help the entrepreneurs on this call to become more informed and put themselves in the best position to get a yes declination when they do apply for funding. And so my suggestion is that you take some good notes today, because in this very short period of time, I will attempt to prepare you to successfully apply for microloan. To start this presentation, I want to at least highlight the KIVA microloan product. It's an excellent character building lending product. Let's talk about it. Why is it so unique? It's unique because it offers 0% interest rate up to $15,000. Since 2011, KIVA has facilitated crowdfunding over $50 million to 8,000 businesses across the country. 66% of these entrepreneurs have been females, 80% have been entrepreneurs of color, 51% have been Black-owned businesses, 18% have been immigrants, 34% have been startups or first-year businesses. So if you want an affordable, socially connected microloan up to $15,000, the KIVA microloan, I think, is the loan you need to take a look at. I'll go more in detail with the KIVA microloan back in June and July. We're going to talk about 2 additional workshops that will be scheduled for entrepreneurs to sign up for, and we can go more in detail about this loan and many other things. But as we move forward and talk about this thing about microlending, I want to talk about 2 concepts that are rarely talked about in this entrepreneurial ecospace, and I want to talk about them. One is called a tech-enabled business, and the other one is capital stacking. What are those 2 concepts, and why are they important to you as entrepreneurs? When the pandemic started back in March of 2020, almost every small business in this country was shut down. Those who were able to stay open and who are still open to this day had to pivot or had to massage their business model to still reach the consumers in order for them to still generate revenue. What ended up happening is that you had these mom and pop businesses in the neighborhood who have been around for a very long time and dependent solely on the revenue that was generated from the community. But if they had pivoted their business and created an online presence, and what I mean by that is typically we used to tell entrepreneurs, you need to have a website, at least a one pager so people can find you. But during the start of the pandemic, those business owners who took that one pager, did not have a website, but created an e-commerce presence on the internet, were still able to reach their consumers either by allowing people to place orders and you mailing the goods to them, or we had organizations that would deliver the goods on behalf of your business. What we have found is this new category of revenue that created this category called tech-enabled businesses, meaning using tech to generate an additional revenue stream. So those businesses who were traditionally neighborhood businesses now have this new stream of revenue coming from selling online. And why is that important? Because now they're still a neighborhood business, they're serving the community, but guess what? Now they have this additional revenue stream from selling their products, not only just in the community, but now they can sell it across the country and bring that revenue back into the community. So we call those businesses now that use e-commerce, online presence, and even social media to generate revenue, we call those tech-enabled businesses. The second concept that you want to know a little bit more is capital stacking. Capital stacking is important because say you have a capital need, maybe you need $150,000 for your business, and you go out and apply for a microloan. And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about what are the criteria, typical criteria for a microloan. And a microloan typically is $50,000 or less. Okay, so if you have a capital need of $150,000, if you apply for just one microloan, that $50,000 is not going to get you to $150,000. So what you do is you apply for funding from multiple sources, i.e., maybe you apply for a microloan for a max of $50,000. Then maybe you apply for funding from a CDFI, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, which could probably lend you $100,000. Now, if you get approved for both the microloan as well as the CDFI, you would done what we call a capital stack. You use funding on top of funding to meet your capital need. Or maybe you got $50,000 from a microlender, one microlender. Then you got another $50,000 from another one, and then a third one, you got another $50,000. Guess what? You capital stack those microloans to get your $150,000. Capital stacking is very important because you need to know where you get your funding from, and will you need one or more funders to meet your capital needs. So we call that capital stacking. What is microlending? Traditional microlending through the SBA, they say it's $50,000 or less, flexible underwriting criteria, and typically the lending is mission driven, that the microlender has a purpose solely to lend to a targeted population that is undercapitalized or does not have access to capital. Their underwriting is very flexible. It's relationship building, it's character building, lending, where they get to know you and believe in your business. Then if you need more than $50,000, you might have to go to a CDFI lender, which stands for Community Development Financial Institution, or community lender, who typically lends more than $50,000, but less than maybe a bank. Banks typically don't like to lend, and it depends on the bank, less than $250,000 or $500,000. So you have the micro lender at $50,000, you have the CDFI lender at $250,000 or $500,000 or less. And then if your capital need is greater than $250,000 or $500,000, depending on the financial institution, you might have to go to a bank. Let's talk about this thing called how to successfully apply for a microloan. All of this that I've covered so far all ties in together. And let me tell you why. I wrote a book called How to Successfully Apply for a Microloan. In this book, I list 14 steps you need to take to properly apply for a microloan. And when I say steps, really, it's really 14 questions that you should have for every lender that you talk to that you think you want to apply for funding. And why is this important? Well, what I'm finding is a lot of entrepreneurs waste a lot of time applying for loans that they shouldn't have applied for. I.e., let me give you an example. Typically, when you apply for a loan, people get real excited about it. They get real excited about it. They don't want to ask any questions. They want to close the loan quickly. But what we have found in the past is that if you close on that loan and it's not the right loan for you, it's going to cause you a lot of problems. Let me give you an example of something that we see very frequently out here in the lending community. Say you are opening a new spa, okay? And you applied for $150,000. You were nervous about applying for that funding, but guess what? You got approved for that funding. You get excited, you sign the loan documents, you go to closing. They say, listen here, your first payment is due in 30 days. Okay, you're satisfied with that. But what you didn't hear is that they said that first payment is due in 30 days. Let's take a look at that spot. The spot that you're building is going to take 3 to 4 months to build out the space, to prepare it to open for you. What problem do we have? 30 days after you close on that loan, that first payment is due. What we see is a lot of businesses, they close on these loans without asking the right questions. And what ended up happening in a situation like this, if your first payment is due 30 days after you close on the loan, you potentially, well, not potentially, you will be making payments on your loan without having your business open, generating revenue to cover that cost. We've seen small business owners get into a serious financial situation because they cannot afford to make their loan payment while they're building out their space. If you don't have liquid cash, if you don't have like a second job or money saved to make those payments, before you even open your doors, you're going to have problems. So it's important to ask, when is your first payment due? And we'll talk a little bit more about that on number 4. The first thing that you want to find out when you speak to a lender is, well, first of all, do you offer a line of credit or do you offer a term loan? Why is that important? Okay. If you need money for working capital, covering short-term employee costs, covering supplies, then you want a line of credit. If you're building out a space, if you're purchasing large equipment, etc., you might need a term loan, which means longer term than a line of credit. With a term loan, you close on that loan. At the time of you close on that loan, they give you a check. You have equal monthly payments for the term of that loan, which could be 24, 36, 48 months. With a line of credit, when you close on that line of credit, say you were approved for $50,000. When you close on that $50,000 line of credit, you don't make any payments on that until you draw down on that line of credit and use it. Therefore, you don't have any payments until you use the money. Off, it becomes available again. So in the scenario where I need a line of credit, I know it's going to take a little while when I open up my business before my revenue exceeds my expenses. So I need to cover my supplies. I need to cover my employee costs. I'm going to apply for a line of credit. That's what I need, just cover short-term needs. If you have some equipment you need to purchase, you don't want to put it on a line of credit. You want to have a term loan. So if I go to a bank and I say, hey, this is what I need money to cover short-term costs until I become profitable, and they offer you only a term loan, well, that term loan is not the type of loan that you want. You need a line of credit. So if that lender only offers a term loan, but they do not offer a line of credit, you don't want to go with that lender. You want to go to another lender to find out, hey, do you offer a line of credit? Because what you don't want to do is get the wrong loan product, and then you don't want to be paying on a loan when you don't need to, i.e., I have not started drawing down on a line of credit. Why should I be making any payment? So that's the first question. Do you offer a line of credit or do you offer a term loan? And if they don't offer the product you want, go to another lender. The second question you want to ask is, what type of businesses will they lend to? Will they lend to your business? If you have a clothing business and you go in and you apply for some funding, ask them, hey, do you lend to a retail clothing business? If they say no, it's okay. Go to another lender. Why is that important? Well, what I see more so with more food-based businesses like restaurants, a lot of lenders, they lend a lot to these restaurants or these food-based businesses. When they get too many of these loans in their portfolio, what they end up doing is say, hey, we need to halt lending to this population of business owners until we bring down our loan volume to these business owners before they lend. So if someone say, hey, we do not lend to your type of business right now, don't worry about it. Go to the next lender. No need to make an application with a lender that is not going to lend to your type of business. Third, collateral net. That's a question you have to ask the lender. I've seen numerous times where people apply for a loan. Once again, this excitement that you get just because someone has approved you for a loan. They apply for a loan. They go through the entire process of submitting documentation, and then they get to closing. And then the lender says, hey, so what are you going to use as collateral? And then you're looking like, what collateral? You didn't ask that question early on, and you went through this entire process of applying for a loan, but you have no collateral. The second thing you might want to ask is whether it's collateral or not, and what type of collateral do you need for this loan? i.e., do I have to put the equipment for my business? If I have a truck or a vehicle for the business up as collateral, do I have to put my home up for collateral? Can you use my receivables if I have a service-based business? These are the type of questions you want to ask to see if they do require collateral, what type of collateral will they accept on behalf of the organization? If they require collateral and you don't have any, it might be best for you to go take a look at another lender. If they do offer collateral and you have something that you can put up for collateral, then maybe you move forward to the next step. A lot of micro lenders do not ask for collateral, but some do. Most CDFIs and all banks typically ask for collateral. Next, a grace period. Now, this goes back to what I was saying before in that example. If you close on a loan, you need to know upfront whether or not you will have a grace period. So what I didn't say is that sometimes maybe you don't need a grace period. Maybe they offer the opportunity where for the next 3 to 4 months, remember the scenario I gave about building out that space, maybe the next 3 to 4 months, you make interest-only payments, which are really, really small. And most entrepreneurs can afford to make those minimum payments during a period of time. Some lenders might even offer a grace period of 3 to 4 months before you make your first loan payment. Then they might give you 3 to 4 months of interest-only payments. Typically, you find micro lenders and some CDFIs who do that because they understand the struggles that small business owners go through early on, especially if they're doing a build out. They need to get their doors open, and it takes a little while to grow their revenue. Now, there are actually 10 more steps that I want to cover, but I'm not going to cover those today. I'm going to hold off on those 10 steps until we have our next couple of meetings. One will be held in June, the other one in July. Note that you can kind of negotiate some of these things. Some lenders will negotiate some of these steps here. If you ask them, they might work with you. Also, as a business owner, come prepared with a pitch. As part of your strategy of being prepared to apply for funding, come with a pitch in terms of how you're going to pitch your business. Build a relationship with that loan officer that you're dealing with. Give that loan officer the tools that he or she needs in order to advocate in front of the lender, not the lender, in front of the underwriter, to be able to get your loan approved. Some lenders, and we'll talk about this during the other two sessions, might require a business plan. Some may not require a business plan. And I'm going to give you this hint as well when we talk about credit. And I think this is important. If you know you have bruises on your credit report, be proactive and address those bruises in your credit report. And what I mean by that is write a letter of explanation, breaking down all those bruises, or if you just have one bruise, but explaining the bruises in a letter and put that in your loan packet. You're going to be establishing a relationship with the loan officer, not the underwriter, because the underwriter sits behind the desk and all they do is review loan application. It's the relationship with that loan officer that's going to help push your loan packet, hopefully through the approval process. But the underwriter knows nothing about you. They're just going to get a packet with all your the information from a checklist that they give you that you need to submit for your application. And as they peruse your loan application and they look at your credit report, they might see some things in the credit report that they need answers on. What will happen if you don't proactively address it, like submit a letter explaining those bruises, is that they're going to have to kick the loan back to the loan officer. The loan officer is going to have to contact you. And guess what? You just wasted precious time because you already knew that there were certain things on there. And what I mean by that, maybe you have some medical bills. A lot of lenders might not hold the fact that you have medical bills on your credit. You might have gone through a divorce. I mean, the pandemic, that's justifiable, explaining the struggles of the pandemic. You might have some student loans. If you know these things could negatively affect you because they're on your credit report, just write a nice little letter explaining each item one by one, put it in your loan packet. So when the underwriter reviews your loan packet and they see these bruises, but here's this letter explaining it, it helps them make a decision right then and there instead of kicking it back. The way I explain it is that when you submit that letter of explanation, it's like a resume. When you submit your resume, you're selling yourself. With this letter of explanation, you're really selling yourself as well. Like, hey, these things have happened to me, but since then I'm doing this to prepare myself to get approved for a loan. I'm going to stop right there. I went over a lot of concepts. I'm going to go more in detail later in June and July when we have our next two sessions. Before we go to the questions, I see here on the screen the dates of those two sessions. We have one session is going to be held on June 16th from 12 to 1 o'clock. And the second session will be held July 14th from 12 to 1 o'clock. I highly recommend that you sign up for these two sessions. I will definitely go more in detail with this thing called microlending and the steps to successfully apply for a microloan. And I think I'll leave it right there. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you about microloans. Thank you.
Warren, thank you so much. That was really, we have a couple of questions coming in, but it was very informational. And so just to kind of reiterate, session 2 is when we're really going to go into the ask and what you need to have prepared and lined up to actually get yourself ready to apply, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Because we do have a couple questions asking that right now. What should they do? Do you have a little bit of a teaser as to what they should be gathering now in preparing for the ask, or perhaps maybe they can gather ahead of the June 16th session so that way maybe they can review it with you?
So typically each lender has a checklist of items that they want you to submit for their loan application, but usually these are some of the things that are pretty consistent. One of them is get a copy of your credit report and review it. Okay, that's one. The second thing is, if you know that you're going to apply for a certain dollar amount because maybe there's certain costs you're going to encounter, like for instance, you want to buy a new piece of equipment, get a copy, a quote for that piece of equipment, put that together with your packet. Proof of ownership. They typically want to see proof of ownership of your business. If your business is registered through the state or through the county or through the city, get a copy of that business registration. If there's more than one owner, you're going to have to get the personal information from each owner. And typically, if the owner has 20% or more ownership, they want to include information about them in that as well. Whether you know upfront now or later that you have to have collateral, think about what are you going to put up as collateral? Explain to them what it is that you're going to put up for collateral. If you have other funding that's coming your way, whether it's grant funding, whether it's another loan, and I'm going to talk about that briefly as well. Have proof of that. What you're doing is building your packet that you're going to eventually submit to a lender. So those are some of the things you can do. And the other thing is, I talk about capital stacking, where you use multiple funding sources, and typically they're multiple loans. If you think you need to capital stack your deal to reach your capital needs, you need to make sure that every lender that you apply for funding knows about the other lender. Very, very, very important in this world of micro lending. The last thing, remember I mentioned this is all about character building, relationship building type lending. They do not want any surprises, because you're building a relationship with the lenders. They're trusting you. And this has happened, Stephanie. I've seen it where people have applied for a micro loan. They had a great relationship with the loan officer, and they get to closing and they run your credit report one more time, and they see you apply for another loan and you never said anything about it. It immediately destroys the trust that you had built so hard with that current lender. So it's okay to let them know to say, hey, I need 75,000. I'm only coming for 50,000 from you, and I got to get 25 from another lender. Here's that lender. So you'll know that there are no surprises that I'm applying for two different loans to meet my capital need. And I'm going to talk about, like I said, a little bit more about that during additional workshops.
That's great advice, that basically honesty is key. And also that you're working with a person, not a computer.
Yes, yeah. Very much so, very much. And this is why micro lending has been so successful, because they're working with the individual. And I use this phrase, I say micro lenders are credit driven. Banks are credit score driven. And people say, well, man, that sounds like that's the same. No, it really isn't. When you apply for a loan with a bank, what is the first thing they do? They run your credit. They try to see what your FICO score is, and they try to match up your FICO score to the minimum FICO score allowed for you to proceed on with their loan. If you do not meet that minimum, you're denied immediately. Micro lenders, it's a completely different situation. They might run your credit score, but they want to find out what happened. You explain to them, typically in writing. And then guess what? They still move forward as long as you provide a satisfactory explanation as to why these things are on your credit. It's a different type of lending. It's relationship building. You're building trust. And that's why, be honest, do not hold anything back. Tell them anything, surprises that might pop up that you know about, tell them it's okay. They want to work with you. And micro lenders are lending in communities across the country, because this relationship building type lending works. It works on a whole nother level. And I say that because if we can get your businesses funded, you are really part of the economic redevelopment of your community. So we get funding to you, and you become and get technical assistance to support your business. You will hire people from the community. And when you hire people from the community, that includes the disenfranchised, the returning citizen, that's that single man or single mother, senior citizens. These are individuals most corporations won't hire. But guess what? When you decide to open up a business in your neighborhood, you have become an economic development engine. We're talking about, it's bigger than just you. And I tell entrepreneurs this all the time. Listen, when you open up a business, it's not about you anymore. It's about what effect you have on that community. And when you can open up a business and hire people from the community, it affects generations of kids seeing their mothers, sisters, neighbors, and then walking to work, enjoying work, making money, coming back home because they're making money, fixing up their homes, taking a little vacation, sending their kids to kids. This is this huge ripple effect that you get from supporting entrepreneurs with microloans. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're on this call, once you decide to open up your business, or even if you're open right now, it's not about you anymore. It's about the economic redevelopment efforts that will come out of supporting you as a business owner.
Absolutely. So we do have two more questions before we head to our panelists. Is, in your experience, is there a type of business that will not get approved for a loan?
The one that stands out more so than anything else, medical or recreational marijuana businesses. cannabis businesses.
Okay.
And from what I've seen across the country, the reason is right now it has not been legalized on the federal level. So a lot of lenders, especially CDFIs, get funding from the federal government or a source that's funded from the federal government. And so they don't want to jeopardize their ability to access capital that they can lend out because they're lending to businesses that have not been federally approved to do not have a federally approved product that they can support. Let me say that.
Okay. Okay. And we have another question in the chat. Do microloans report automatically and help build business credit?
So it depends. A lot of micro lenders, you talking about report to your business credit or personal credit, because you got two things going on there.
I think they're asking about business credit.
About business credit. So typically with business credit, you need to first, before anything can be reported from a business perspective towards your business credit, you need to set up a Dun and Bradstreet number. And once you set up that Dun and Bradstreet number and set up an active business credit profile, then now you can have that reported to your Dun and Bradstreet account. Now, some micro lenders don't report, okay, because they don't want anything to negatively affect them if they should miss one or two payments, because micro lenders typically have a lot more flexibility than your traditional lenders. If you run into a problem, a micro lender can skip a payment or two. And this became very, Stephanie, during the pandemic, this is what happened. We had all these business owners across the country who had microloans. And when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, they couldn't pay those loans back. So micro lenders had the ability to say, hey, listen here, for 6 months, you don't have to make a payment. We understand, okay? Not a problem whatsoever. Some traditional lenders tried to help, but some of them couldn't. So guess what? It negatively affected their credit, their business credit, because they probably could not have made those payments. That's why microlending is important. They understand the small business owners, the struggles they go through. But we do have some microlenders that are now reporting business credit at minimum, because they do want business owners to capture the positive payments that they've been making and having it on their business credit. But just note the benefit of having a working with a micro lender, they have flexibility. Real quick, I had a situation where I was supporting a business owner who had a towing business, brand new business. He was a returning citizen, phenomenal individual. He got approved for a micro loan. He got the truck that needed to be retrofitted to turn it into a towing truck. And they were having problems with the company that was retrofitted for towing. And literally, they had it for like 3 to 4 months. And he would call his lender, who he had a great relationship with, that lender trusts him. And they talked to the company that was retrofitting the truck for towing. It went on like 3-4 months. He never had he could not get out there and generate revenue. But because they were a micro lender, they have flexibility. And you know what they did? And I thought this was absolutely beautiful. After 4 or 5 months, because he could not get his truck out there, and they understood, and they also spoke to the company that was handling the repair, said, listen here, we're going to modify your loan. We're going to take those 4 or 5 months where you could not make a payment because your truck was tied up in the shop. We're going to put it on the back end of the loan. And then from this point on, it'll be the start of your loan. That's why you do for micro lender. They understand, they can modify, they can help you, they can support you. And that's why micro lending has been so successful across the country.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I do understand that in our third session, you're going to be talking about different micro lenders that you can apply to and offer. We're going to talk about, different avenues we can tap into and what the different micro lenders look like, correct?
Correct. And what I will do is I'll find all the micro lenders that are in the state of Delaware, but then I also look at national micro lenders, because I tell business owners all the time, everybody's going for that same money in your community, but there are actually national micro lenders who lend in your community that you probably don't know anything about, who have the exact same mission as any other micro lender that might be locally based, but they will lend to your community and provide a great micro loan product. So yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Perfect. So we do have one more question. I do understand, Warren, you're going to stay with us for a little bit for the panel to answer some additional questions, but let's address this one in the chat. As a new business, can you separate your personal credit from business credit when applying for lending?
Unfortunately, no. Okay. But what I tell business owners is when you start your business, immediately get your Dun& Bradstreet number and set up your business credit profile. So what typically happens is at about 2 or 3 years of being in business and building your business profile, the goal is that your business profile will allow that lender down the line, if you need more money, to look solely at your business credit, irrelevant to what your personal credit is. But unfortunately, in the beginning, the only way that they can kind of do a background check on you is to take a look at your personal credit. So it's kind of hard as a new business owner, but if you set up that Dun & Bradstreet number and account in the very beginning stages of your business, 2 or 3 years down the road, you continue to build it. Hopefully you put yourself in a position where the lender said, listen, I don't need to look at your personal credit because you have excellent business credit. And that does happen very frequently.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our next 2 sessions because I know we're going to do a deeper dive into a lot of the topics that you talked about today. So thank you so much for taking time and talking to us. If there's any other questions, please throw them into the chat or throw them into the Q&A and we will address them in the panel as we can and maybe towards the end. But thank you so much, Warren. So please stay on for a few more minutes in the panel. We'd love to have you and have you continue contributing.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you to all the entrepreneurs who are willing to listen to this tidbit of information I had to give them.
So next up, we have our panel discussion, which is going to be facilitated by Peggy Geisler of PMG Consulting. Joining us will be Logan Herring, CEO of the work group, and Eli Cherner, who is the director at KIVA USA. So I'm going to turn it over to Peggy.
Thanks, Stephanie. I really appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to give a brief overview of our 2 panelists here. Mr. Brian Tracy, unfortunately, had an emergency, couldn't be with us today, but we will be having him in the future. We've already made those arrangements. So let me introduce them respectively first. Mr. Logan Herring, he is local Wilmingtonian. After graduating from Goucher College, Mr. Herring founded a nonprofit dedicated to mentoring at-risk young men in Wilmington and slowly grew to take on bigger roles, including the executive director of the Kingswood Community Center in the city's Riverside neighborhood in 2016. 2 years later, he was tapped to lead the ambitious Reach Riverside initiative, which uses the national purpose-built communities model to revitalize housing, education, and community services in the neighborhood. With the addition of the Warehouse, a teen design co-working and service delivery space focused on serving the city's teen population, the work group was created. And while the work group was set a capital campaign of about in 2019 of raising $20 million in 5 years, Herring's organization has already raised over $33 million. They are now targeting a goal of $50 million by 2023. But Herring is personally pushing to get it done in a year. And as you know, anybody who is from the area knows Logan. I think one of the biggest things that we need to understand is nonprofits are businesses, and how and some of the techniques that they use from a nonprofit perspective or a business perspective can be utilized across both landscapes. Our second panelist is Mr. Eli Cherner. He has been into the business and funding landscape for over a decade. He's been with KIVA for over 3 years. Currently, he's the director of KIVA US. And KIVA's mission is to expand access to capital in 4 different countries, and really focused on those who might be financially excluded. Prior, he was also an operations manager of the Draper Kaplan Foundation, which is venture philanthropy firm supporting early stage social enterprises. And so I think with both of these individuals, they bring a lot to the table. And I think if we could pull them up so that everybody can see all of them at the same time, Stephanie, so that we can have them talk a little bit. I'm going to ask Logan if we get started. I always like to I'm going to start with Logan and say, as you're thinking about a landscape and you've heard what Warren had to say, and he's still with us as well, thinking about your community, thinking about raising capital, whether you're a startup, small entrepreneur, because you start somewhere, if you look at your progression, Logan, or you're trying to amass large amounts of funding, what are some of the primary things that you think you used or you think need to be considered in the landscape?
Well, Peggy, first, thank you for the lovely introduction. I'll correct you on some of the numbers in a little bit, but I'll blame it on your head, not your heart. No, actually, you probably aren't even aware of some of the numbers because they've been more recent. But that's good, probably a good segue into answering your question, which is, we got to think big. And so, in communities of color that have been disenfranchised, we have been conditioned for a long time to just get by, to struggle, to accept status quo. And what we've done for the past few years is we challenge that status quo. We think big. And so when we talk about our project and our revitalization effort, to your point, it started with a $20 million capital campaign, which we set our goals on. Having the national consultant, the Curtis Group, who is our fundraiser, come back to us and say, we think you guys can do 25 million. And that was the end of 2019. We officially launched the campaign. To date, as of Wednesday, I think we're close to 84 million raised. And we're looking at a $300 million total project. So we have leveraged over $120 million of investment coming into this neighborhood. So when I was hearing Mr. Galloway speak about micro lending and the importance of small businesses, that's like the next step in our progression, is that, not just what I term as nonprofits, I call them tax exempt businesses, to your point. We're operating businesses and I operate 3 of them collectively. We need small businesses. We need an entire community effort. And you think about what we celebrated, I think in the last year, which is the, and it's not necessarily a celebration, but the Tulsa massacre and Black Wall Street and what was created in that community so long ago. I would love to replicate that in Riverside, to have a community that's built for the community. So the last thing I'll state, because I don't want to take too much time, is that we have an initiative called Restore, Real Estate Strategy to Obtain Racial Equity. And Peggy, you've been around long enough to understand that I create a different acronym like every other day. But the goal of Restore really is taking ownership of the community again. And so our goal is to acquire at least 40 acres of under or unutilized land and convert them to communal assets, given the historical significance of 40 acres. So I'll stop there. I'm sure I have plenty more to say, but I want to give some time to the other panelists.
I appreciate that, Logan. I think momentum is important. Sorry, I got those numbers wrong. I can't keep up with you. I
appreciate it. It just made it sound that much more audacious when I came and corrected you.
But I think what's really important is that you're community minded. You're saying, look, there are opportunities here. And I think sometimes we believe that these opportunities don't exist. And today's about understanding what those opportunities are, whether it's small opportunity and granular or large opportunity. It's really about setting a goal, setting your sights and getting people engaged and build trust. You were really good at that, have been in the past, currently are now, and will be in the future, I'm sure. So I think that was something that Warren talked about earlier. I'm going to ask the same question for Eli, because he has a lot of experience, not only through KIVA across the US, but he also around venture capital. Same kind of question. I mean, when you're thinking about this, what kinds of things should people bring to the table when they're coming to the table? Where do they look? How do they look? Where do they even start, Eli?
Yeah, thanks so much. First of all, just for inviting us here today and having us. Thank you, Warren, for such a great presentation before this. It's a really interesting question, and I think it really just depends on the stage of the business. So I'll speak through a couple different examples from my experience. If you're coming to KIVA for a microloan, which is a no fee, no interest, no collateral loan, that's really what we consider to be the first step of the capital ladder for folks. What you need to bring to that is really many of the things that Warren talked about, whether it's responsiveness and just open communication through your loan application, whether it's a high quality profile photo and a loan application. At KIVA, you actually get a chance to tell publicly your story on our website about your business to get others to see. And in our case, given that we're a crowdfunding website, the opportunity to bring your network to publicly vouch for you and help participate in that social underwriting process. That's one of the main ways that we underwrite our loans, is by actually throwing it back to the entrepreneur and asking them to say, hey, can you get 10, 15, or 20 people to lend you a very small amount? Our minimum is $25, as a way of publicly vouching for you and giving that social collateral to your loan. So if you're coming to KIVA, that's one of the things that you can do. Based off the experience that I had at the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, those businesses are much more established down the line. They're looking for investments in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, usually private investments from a foundation. And that is actually grant capital. But it's called venture philanthropy because the model that organization took, which is a really interesting model for entrepreneurs to consider, is it's not just an investment of capital, but the DRK Foundation would actually take a board seat on the organization as well. And so you're both half of the value of what you're getting as capital. The other half, or arguably more, is the expertise of someone who's built organizations and built successful businesses themselves, who has a network of potential funders that they can introduce you to, who understands the growing pain of businesses and how to help you overcome those. And what you're getting is a mentor on your board that you talk with weekly to run all of your challenges by. So that's kind of, in many cases, my ideal version of getting capital, where you not only get capital, but you get the expertise and the mentorship that comes with it. And that aspect of community is something that I think is threaded through everything that Warren, Logan, and I have all said here. I mean, Logan, your work bringing multiple nonprofits together to collaborate is something that every community could use more of. KIVA's work, bringing community in order to underwrite loans, I think is something that's really powerful. Yeah, that's I think what I have to say on that.
All right. Well, I mean, what's really exciting about this is, when you were talking, it was very clear to me, Eli, that P2P Freedom Foundation, the E3 initiative, is actually doing a lot of that from an ecosystem development, bringing in the mentors, getting you mentors of high profile, establishing you with political influencing, looking across the landscape of all the funding. I think it's really important to understand that you don't have to do this alone. Setting up these ecosystems. I mean, Logan's talking about setting up an ecosystem. All of these things blended together gives us a much more robust landscape for that. I'm wondering, when we talk about the trust issue, building mentors, getting people to be mentors, I'm going to ask each of you, because all of you have probably been through this process, myself included. So anybody can chime in first. How do you go about doing that? I mean, let's say you use a PDFF or you go to a Logan Herring, but how do you, your organizations yourself, suggest that our entrepreneurs link in with certain organization strategies to get that kind of level of political influence, financial influence? Just would like to hear that a little bit. Who'd like to go first?
I'm happy to chime in a little bit. I think it certainly has become more difficult since the pandemic. I mean, building trust in person is so much easier if you can go visit your local loan officer or go visit, a local branch, go have coffee with someone. Building trust that way is a lot harder to do these days. Hopefully things are opening back up and that opportunity will present itself again. But these days, I think taking the opportunity to actually meet virtually and see someone face to face, even if through a screen, is super helpful. Being just really consistent with your outreach and with your follow up and with your communication is super important. I know as our review team looks at opportunities, or as other organizations that I've worked with, entrepreneurs that have been extremely communicative and proactive in that process is a really helpful form of building that trust. I think that ultimately, one of the things too that can be really helpful to build trust is just collecting data from a really early on in your business to be able to showcase the impact that you're trying to have. And I think in this day and age, being able to convey numbers around what your business is accomplishing, how capital might be able to fill a gap, which will help you grow in a certain way. Being able to come with data, whether it's about business finances or whether it's around impact and strategy, is also something I've seen to be really helpful in establishing trust.
Logan?
Yeah.
Oh, no, Warren, you're about to.
Yeah, I want to chime in if you don't mind, just
No,
briefly.
no,
That,
go
you know, I definitely concur with everything that Eli just said. The good thing is, it seems like we're slowly coming out of this pandemic. I'm hoping that, you know, we've made that turn around that corner. When there's special events going on in the community or events taking place in the community that are sponsored by small business service agencies, government entities that support small businesses, chamber of commerces, we need to have these entrepreneurs come out and network with the individuals, the people that are there, because you build relationships there. We talk about microlending. Microlending is relationship lending. It's all about building relationships. So if you want to have access to microloans, if you want to have access to the resources that are out there, you have to kind of begin to get back into networking, attend special events. And then, you know, something else that's real popular and people don't think much about it more than just the money you can win, but pitch competitions. When you, whether you win or not, when you pitch your business in front of an audience of people, people get to know who you are. People want to know who you are. They want to support you, whether you win or not. It's those type of events that entrepreneurs need to take full advantage of. They're probably free or very low cost to kind of build a support network in the community. Because if this lender, if a lender is at your pitch competition and they love your pitch and they want to see how they can support you, that lender might try to call you and say, hey, I need you to come over here and apply for a microloan because you're the exact type of business we want to support. That happens more frequently than that. And that's because those entrepreneurs who get it, who understand that they have to be visible, the support will come their way because they're out there getting involved in the small business ecosystem.
Warren, you couldn't have teed up better. And Logan knows exactly where I'm going with this, right? He's laughing.
He teed me up a bunch of different ways. Let me tell you a little story. So no, seriously. So I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the timeline of when I started my work in Riverside, and I joined Kingswood Community Center at the beginning of 2016. Traditional community center, early learning academy, senior center, and my predecessor had made some very poor business decisions that jeopardized the existence of Kingswood. It was about to go out of business. We had missed payroll. So I came in and my goal was to really just do a complete turnaround of the organization. And Peggy spoke to it in her introduction. I started a nonprofit at the age of 23. And a few years in, we've received some funding from some of the larger organizations. At first, it was Longwood and Welfare, who are obviously associated with the P. DuPont Freedom Foundation. And so I had those relationships. And when I was at Kingswood, I wanted to reach out to those foundations to see if they would fund Kingswood. And I quickly found out that they were not interested in funding Kingswood because of the predecessor, because misappropriating of funds in the past. And so they gave me the Heisman, said never funding Kingswood ever again. And I think, Eli, you spoke to it, is consistency. So again, that was 2016 and 2017. By the end of 2017, Longwood and Welfare funded Kingswood, and Longwood funded us to the tune of $205,000. And then, so in 2017, also concurrently, I did the pitch contest for the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation, which was reinventing Delaware, for the warehouse, and it won as a top overall idea. In 2018, Longwood funded the warehouse at the tune of $800,000. And then in 2019, was it 2019 or 2020, we came back to Longwood and they funded Reach Riverside for $500,000, and then recently funded Kingswood again for $1.6 million. So again, the consistency, the outcomes, but I think one thing, Warren, you kept speaking about, which is totally true, which is social capital and building that social capital. So the argument is already there by the time you fill out the paperwork. And it's just really, checking off the boxes. And so that's where we are at this point. We have been so consistent, have been built so much momentum and trust in the broader community, that right now, whenever we come into these conversations, it almost feels like we're in the position of power versus what we typically in a nonprofit space call funders. But I think where it's applicable today is we don't call them funders, we call them investors. And so whether it's a nonprofit space or a for-profit, they're looking to invest and they're looking for the best return. And we think we offer the best return bar none anywhere, whether it's local, regional, or national. If you come invest with us, you are going to get the return that you want and probably even better. So hopefully I didn't take too long on my story, but I think it piggybacked on both of what you both said.
Well, I think there's three big points here, right? I think one is that just because someone gives you a no out of the gate doesn't mean it has to be the no forever.
That's when the sale starts, is what we
Yeah,
say.
that's when the sale starts, right? That's that pitch. We want to make sure that we're making a pitch that come back and hear what Warren's got to say about that, right? So I'm going to tie those thoughts together. Number two, Logan, I think, it's that trust building. Over time, you start out with a certain number that you need, but if you show and demonstrate that hard work, that goodwill, and that perseverance, that can elevate. I think Eli has said that, Warren said that, you've said that, I think part of it is being out in the community. I mean, one of the things that Stephanie talked about is, us bringing in all the pitch. There's a ton of pitch competitions. I don't think everybody knows what they all, in order to have access to something, you have to be aware of it, right? So bringing that up. And so what else, if you had some advice, because I want to keep this, we've got about 15 more minutes, and then we're going to, see if there's any other questions, start asking if there's some questions, right? Somebody said in there, that's grit and passion all the way across the top of my screen. I see that, right? If you have advice for some of these entrepreneurs that go, yeah, well, that's Logan, or, yeah, well, Mr. Warren's got 13 books, right? Or look at Eli, he worked for social. I mean, what is, you guys didn't start there, did you? No.
So I was in preparation for today, I was listening to a couple podcasts featuring Simon Sinek. And one thing he truly believes in is that nobody is successful alone. Like, humans are naturally social creatures. And so, oftentimes, I get the accolades, I get the awards and the recognition because, I'm the CEO. I'm the person that you see on the screen. But giving credit that this has been a journey, and there have been hundreds, if not thousands of people, individuals, entities, organizations that have contributed and partnered and collaborated to allow what you see today as results and what you'll see tomorrow and in the future as results. So, one thing we always say is that if you want money, ask somebody for advice. And if you want advice, ask somebody for money. And so we can't be afraid to pull somebody to the side and ask them, like, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? What would you do? Can you help? Because naturally people get most of, I would say, their fulfillment through helping others, not through their own personal gains and success.
And I'll piggyback on Logan. For me, irrespective of my background, my love for economic and community redevelopment really started when I came back to Detroit, my hometown, and I was able to take all the talent, expertise, and experience that I had to help redevelop our old commercial districts. Because I remember as a young man growing up, the thriving neighborhood businesses that we had. Fast forward to now, they didn't really exist when I came back into Detroit back in 2005. I just had a passion for change and making change in my community. And I fell in love with this product called a microloan because, one, microlenders are lending. So that means the microloans are working. Two, I'm seeing people employed. Three, I'm seeing old commercial districts come back. But more importantly, if you grew up in a neighborhood where you might have had a J.C. Penney's or a Sears, they don't exist. Well, J.C. Penney's is still around, but most of these big box retailers don't exist anymore. To me, it's called opportunities. That same brick and mortar space that these big box retailers had, neighborhood entrepreneurs can set up shop in these spaces and create their own income from the community instead of a big box retailer coming in, taking the money out of the community. So if you really want to impact your community, I'm a firm believer it's through entrepreneurship. Now, not everyone is ready for entrepreneurship or should do entrepreneurship, but those who have the passion for change and they have a product or service they can sell, they can set up shop in their own neighborhood and be part of the change in neighborhood, not the bad, the good, and impact the lives of people in that community. And I've seen that happen hundreds of times. So when I speak on this thing called microlending, it's through passion that I've gotten from seeing the change that's going on. And I really believe in it. And I just think, hey, we're all a part of the solution when we use entrepreneurship to change our community. And I'm blessed to be a part of that.
Well, and you guys have come into the market, and I'm going to get to you, Eli. I'm just going to say this really quickly. You know, KIVA was brought in support of, and I think the Wilmington Alliance is on here. I want to give a shout out for the Wilmington Alliance, who is also thinking about that from an incubation standpoint. I know that Logan's thinking about that. I mean, the city is pretty big, the state's pretty big. There's a lot of opportunity here. So to your point, I think that this is just a lot of momentum. And I think keeping everybody connected on what's available, what's going on, and that's kind of our role across the entire state and landscape. So Eli, I want you to chime in as well on that last thought.
Yeah, just around, I mean, I love both what Logan and Warren said, and totally agree with all your points. The one thing that came to mind too for me is having started my career out as a public high school classroom teacher, jumping into my first year of teaching with 5 weeks of training, and having a complete imposter syndrome of not feeling like I should be there, is that there is this learners or growth mindset that is just so important in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of constantly, and I think not just as an entrepreneur, as anyone, you know, who hopes to develop a professional career, we're always constantly learning and iterating and doing new things. And with technology doing everything that it's doing, and with, you know, what Warren was talking about, a lot of brick and mortars needing to go into e-commerce and constantly needing to learn how to pivot and grow. That growth mindset is just super, super important. And I think that all entrepreneurs, you know, would benefit from just remembering that they are, you know, being an entrepreneur is exceptionally hard, but they are capable, especially through engaging with their community, you know, to the point of others so far, and they don't have to do it alone. But it's a really powerful, it's a powerful outcome when they're able to ask for that help that they need and leverage the community that they need. One of my favorite stats from KIVA loans is that in addition to getting capital, most of our entrepreneurs report that the second most valuable benefit is the confidence that they receive from 100 plus random strangers choosing to support their loan on kiva.org. And so I think if you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea that you're passionate about, that passion will come through, and you are actually doing everyone around you a favor by sharing it with those around you. And they're going to get excited to support you, whether that's through a loan or whether that's just through, you know, frequenting your storefront or how volunteering with you, whatever it is. My advice is just that if you have an idea that you're passionate about, yeah, let it shine and let it, you know, share it with the community around you, because they want to help more than you might believe.
So I think we're going to have some questions come in, and just really quickly want to tie this up a little bit in a bow. Relationship, trust, help, ask for help, look for help, get advice, connect amongst all of your other entrepreneurs, business leaders, and community. If you're not sure where to start, there are plenty of people around the table, including all of us here, to help. I think all that's really important. Stephanie, do we have any questions that are coming in, or do we have anything that if you would like to ask one of our panelists a question, please put it in the question chat box, wherever. I just want to make sure we're giving the audience an opportunity to ask the panelists.
Absolutely. So there is a question about contacting Warren later. I'm going to answer that by saying definitely sign up for the next session, because that's going to be a little bit more in depth and a little bit more, I'm going to say comfy with Warren, because he's going to get into the nitty gritty about your business and can answer more customized questions. But Warren, if somebody does want to get in contact with you, what's the other best way?
The best way is via my email address, which is warreng@kiva.org. warreng@kiva.org.
They want to talk to Warren because Warren has the bag. I want to talk to Warren, but I like getting money. I like getting money I don't have to pay back. I'm sorry.
Look, but you know what, Logan, look, so the connectivity, it doesn't matter where you are. I think the great thing about Delaware is it can be an equal playing field. I think part of the E3 process is to create that equity and equal playing field and access, right? Access to people who have information and experience and passion. I mean, literally, we could do a whole session just on how to exaggerate grit, passion, and market yourself. Logan could do that. I mean, you know, I'm not volunteering you or voluntolding you to do that, Logan, but you know, I'll be back around at some point in time for
Well,
that.
I'm brainstorming right now a partnership with Kiva, and I'm gonna tell you what I've been thinking about. So this rendering you see behind me is a $42 million new community center that we will be building. It'll be complete by the end of 2024, about 100,000 square feet. Part of this, what I want to do in this building is to incubate businesses. So we'll have space that we can incubate businesses in. They can come in, they can rotate, they can revolve. But as those businesses become more popular and demand a greater, I would say, footprint, we would look out on the corridor for properties we've already acquired and storefronts and be able to help support the move into their own brick and mortar. So we'll have tons of foot traffic in the building, and we'll even find ways to incentivize our existing staff by maybe discounting them if they purchase, you know, whether it's food or whatever that business might be producing, to help them build that clientele until they can move into their own brick and mortar out on the boulevard. So I would love to see how we might be able to partner to help bring this to life in the next year or two as we begin to design the community center.
And I think that, so, you know, here's an example, because Logan is Logan's like, look, I'm gonna throw it out there. I got everybody, I got an audience. I'm gonna use my audience, which is a great example. I don't fault that. I think that is an absolute, I think the ecosystem in Delaware, the relationships we all have, I think we can build anything we envision. And I think all the players around the table, including our small entrepreneurs, they're gonna want a space to do that. Logan might be that space. They're gonna need funding. Kiva might be that funding. They're going to need a support mechanism. The ecosystem with P2Pont Freedom Foundation provides that. You know, it's not us or them, it's us all together that is going to create what is needed for communities that have been left behind traditionally for years and generations, right? And it's going to take all of us to help them get there. And I think we're committed to that. I'm assuming that because I know that our leadership, Stephanie and Lindsay's with you and Christy's on here, and then all of our panelists, right? We're all working together on that. So it's about the entrepreneur reaching out to us, being engaged with us, and us being engaged with each other to respond to those entrepreneurs, which I think is really, really important. Other questions? Anything coming in, Stephanie?
Hey, can I respond back to Logan? Logan, absolutely, we need to connect. I just want to
go.
make sure that
Not
you
a
heard
problem.
directly from me. So
We got
Oh,
you.
I didn't need your permission. That was gonna happen anyway. but I appreciate it.
I was also just going to chime in because I would be remiss if I didn't say how excited Kiva is to also be partnering with Cornerstone West CDC and the Wilmington Alliance. Just earlier this year, we actually launched an official Kiva hub in Delaware. And so there is a part for everyone to play in supporting that ecosystem. But we're so excited to be beginning down that path and just with great partners. And I think some of them are on the call, but just wanted to express how excited we are at Kiva to be deepening that relationship and deepening our impact in Delaware.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Eli, because I was just going to ask about that, if you can tee that up. And Christy did add Mary Easley's contact information in the chat. Am I correct in assuming Mary is the person you should contact to learn more about the Kiva hub in Delaware?
Yes, that's right. I believe she's our capital access manager there. Yep.
Awesome. And we are working with Mary and Wilmington Alliance to figure out a day and time that works to really dive deeper into what this new partnership will look like. So we are going to be on the lookout for the next webinar that's going to, in addition to the session 2 and 3 that we have with Warren, we're going to be talking about, you know, what does Kiva look like in Delaware? What does that look like for business owners? What is that going to look like here? And so we're really excited to bring Eli back for that.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that we're also going to bring, I think is really important is what are some of the other venture capital opportunities? How to go outside of your local community? Brian Tracy was so upset about not being here today. He was able to amass large amounts of money from a national perspective. He launched one business and sold it. He now has another one that's on the verge of breaking loose. He's committed to coming back and doing a session with our entrepreneurs in the state. We've got a lot of other lineups coming up, and our goal is to give you as many opportunities. I think Delaware is really on the precipice. This has a lot of robust opportunities, and Stephanie's right at the forefront of that, along with Lindsay, and making sure that all that information is brought to you and supported, so that if you have a need, we can help you find how to meet that need. So I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie as we wrap up.
Yes, well, we do have a couple more questions that are coming through.
Absolutely.
So Warren, we mentioned that you are an author and you wrote 13 books. Are there any specific books on how to raise money that our listeners should be Googling on Amazon, or where can they read that? Warren, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Okay. I don't sell my books on Amazon. I sell them on WarrenGallowayAssociates.com. But the reality of it is, as much as I would love people to purchase my books, if they come back to these other workshops, they're going to get everything that's in those books. So you'll get greater value because not only you're not reading it, you're learning directly from me. And so that's why I'm really excited about the next two sessions, because I'm going to do a download of knowledge of things that will further enhance the things I've already talked about and put entrepreneurs in the best position to access the capital they need for their business. And you hear it directly from me as opposed to a book.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? I'm checking the Q&A. I'm checking the chat. There are a couple of questions that I know I can answer in the Q&A. So I'm doing that, but let me scan through to see if there's any more. And Logan, somebody asked for your contact information too. So you weren't left, you weren't left out.
Yeah, I know. I was feeling a little ashamed, but I think someone dropped it into the chat for me. So thank you.
Yeah, that was me. That was me.
Okay.
And I think that was just the person who asked, but I'm going to drop it in for everyone. And then Eli, can I drop your information in as well, along with Mary Easley, for questions about, what's happening locally?
Sounds good.
Wonderful.
We can also put the information for the Alliance. I know Hera chimed in on there. Thank you, Hera, for being here today. Really appreciate that. And Stephanie, I know that you're going to go over some other things if you want to get engaged with the ecosystem. Privileged to be part of this panel and support this work. Guys, thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you here today.
Yeah, so I do want to mention, yes, thank you. First of all, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Time out of your day. I know it's lunchtime, so some of you may be hungry, so we appreciate it. But I do want to say this. So this is being recorded. All of our E3 members are going to have on-demand access of this recording. If you want to learn more about the E3 membership, which we have several of our members on this call today, you can visit our website, p2pontfreedomfoundation.org, or you can contact Lindsay Pennington, our newest program manager. Lindsay, please throw your information into the chat, but we'll do a follow-up email to all of the attendees today, just kind of wrapping up the key points and inviting you to the next few sessions. I will throw up our contact information for the P2 Pont Freedom Foundation, as well as PMG Consulting, who is dedicated to E3 support. And again, thank you to Wilmington Alliance for our partnership, and of course, Barclays, who is our anchor funder, and to KIVA, the work group, and PMG Consulting for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, everyone have a wonderful day and enjoy your holiday weekend.
Thank you all so much.
We'll do the same.
Thank you. Hi, Christy, you still on?